Welcome to White Pill Radio, the every other, usually, episode of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint. We are so glad that you join us. This is kind of current events, news, headlines, articles that we look at from a Christian worldview. I like to say that it is blessed talk, but not happy talk. And this is post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful, applied theology that definitely does look at these hottest of hot stories from a Christian point of view. So we've got a lot to talk about today, so we're going to, jump in relatively soon. But first, we do want you to go to theologybythepint.org to learn about upcoming events. Austin Freeman, he's going to be... Are you talking in May? Is that right?
Yeah, smash that subscribe button, y'all.
Okay, cool. But theologybythepint.org, May event, April event coming up here at First Lutheran. Anyway, check it out. See what we got. And learn about all of our leadership, like Sarah.
Ta-da!
Sarah is here. Sarah Stone, the one and only, the grand poobah of Theology by the Pint.
Indeed.
And and Austin is repping
Houston Christian University, formerly Houston Baptist University.
Now they're Christians now.
Okay. I've heard that joke a lot.
Probably from me, because I love it.
Yeah. I am the chair of the Department of Apologetics and the administrator of our Masters of Arts in Apologetics. So we are defiantly not post-apologetic, right. But we are the best place in the world to study cultural and imaginative apologetics. We're the intersection of theology, literature, poetry, fantasy, science fiction, all of the other cool stuff, pop culture. And I'm also assistant professor of theology there. And the views expressed on this radio broadcast are not necessarily the views of Houston Christian University.
Unless you like them.
In
and
which
then they
case,
are.
come and study with us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got a lot to dig into. We have so many stories we don't have time for them all, probably. But let's go fast and see what we can do. So, Sarah, start us off.
Here we go. Probably you guys may have seen this already, that Richard Dawkins, who is known for writing The God Delusion and being one of the four horsemen of the new atheist movement, so pretty anti-Christian guy, came out this week saying that maybe actually it's okay to be culturally Christian. So says he defended the idea that a robust Western civilization was dependent on Christian theology to thrive, after being the main reason that Britons lost their faith in God. Later in the article, it says, I must say, I should do this in a British accent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I must say, I was slightly horrified to hear that that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country, and I call myself a cultural Christian, Dawkins said. I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. I'm already vomiting in the back of my throat a little.
Yeah.
I love hymns and Christmas carols. Oh, samesies, Richard Dawkins.
That's what it takes.
I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. And then he goes on to say, it's true that statistically, the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that, he continued.
Nice hedge.
But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful. So dreadful. So he's so weird. I mean, okay, so first of all, the cultural Christian thing is interesting. And, Evan said before we started, the white pill writes itself here, because this idea of recognizing the value of Christianity, I guess, would be what he's saying about culturally Christian, is that we're using the sort of morality of Christianity to orient ourselves around, and that there's something helpful about that. And he makes a distinction twice in this article, at least, about Islam versus Christianity. And he says he would choose Christianity every time, which I guess is lovely for Christians to hear. But this idea that he's happy that the number of people actually believing it are going down. First of all, that's so gross. To say that about something that we believe is actually true. Yeah. But then it's just so selfish, because he says he likes the, Christmas songs and carols, and he likes the cathedrals and the churches. Well, my guy, how do you think the cathedrals and parishes stay from being crumbling?
Well, I'll tell you, having gone to England and Scotland a couple of weeks ago, you have to spend at least $20 to get into them to look around, unless you go to Evensong, and then you can go in as a worshiper. But yes, they charge exorbitant amounts for you to go tour them, which is fine. I understand they're quite expensive.
Capitalism, baby.
But yes, there aren't people in the pew. But I mean, if you take a step back,
There are not people in those pews. There are
Yeah.
plenty of people in pews that don't have the money for the state or established churches like the ones that I used to go to.
okay,
Go ahead.
yeah, like free churches.
Aye.
Yeah, gotcha.
The Free Church of Scotland.
Yep. Go John Knox. So yeah, no, but this guy is definitely the example. It's like wanting the milk without the cow or something,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he wants all the benefits with none of the cost.
Well, he wants the art, right?
He wants the aesthetics.
The cultural expressions, right? The aesthetics of
No,
Christianity.
I think when the Ramadan thing freaked him out because what you saw, I mean, they made a big deal of the end of Ramadan, so you have the iftar feast or whatever, and you saw I mean, it wasn't that long ago, a few months ago, that they were literally taking down the Union Jacks for pride flags, right? And now they have no celebration of Easter, but they have the end of Ramadan, and celebrating that, and I think he's probably legitimately freaked out enough to be like, wait a minute, this isn't quite what I had in mind. I don't think it's just the aesthetics. I think there's a social order component to this.
I think so too. And as a scientist, I think he recognizes all of the fruits that have come out of Christianity, the scientific endeavors and artistic endeavors.
I don't know if he's
You don't think so?
well enough informed. I mean, when I was in Oxford, I had a guy, one of the professors of science. His name's Alan Chapman. He's a well-established. He's one of Dawkins's peers, and when Dawkins made his name, he was talking about how you can't be a scientist and be a Christian, and it just seems totally unconscious of the history.
Well, it's a delusion
of his own discipline, right? That to us seems so obvious. But I do agree, Evan. I think in this thing he's freaking out specifically about Islam, but it wasn't that long ago that he was catching flack from his own team for wanting to deny that there are more than two genders. Mm-hmm. He is a professor of evolutionary biology, after all.
Male, female.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
He's getting flamed from the progressives that he has helped to inculcate, because after all, Richard Dawkins, despite not being a Christian, is still an upper class white British Oxford educated male elite.
Yeah.
And is flaunting his privilege here.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, civilization, culture, whatever meta word you want to put on it, it's a fragile thing. And it's built, and it only works because of voluntary, the willingness of people to voluntarily to put themselves on the line, to hold fast to things even when it's difficult, and to work hard generation after generation to build it. Okay, it doesn't just happen. It's not planned. That's why central planning, those things fail. But civilizations where you have these core beliefs that you think are actually rooted in reality, and like we're going to protect these things, like family, or like rule of law, or what we would call the West. Things like due process, or our jurisprudence is justice.
Cathedrals.
These are
Yeah.
What's that?
Cathedrals.
Yes. I mean, these are things that take decades and decades and decades and decades of sacrifice to assemble, to build, and they can be knocked down in a moment. And people like him so arrogantly come along, and they just want to knock it all down, one day. And then when they sort of see the alternative, which is basically, the lack of those things, the lack of law and order, the lack of jurisprudence, the lack of justice, or a justice by another view. It's like, oh, well, actually, how do I walk this back now? I want all the cultural benefits with none of the cost.
Well, he's seeing his society slip further and further into irrationalism.
Yes.
And he's rightly concerned about that.
He thought he could make a rational case against God, which itself is irrational.
Yeah.
So I actually feel a lot of sympathy for him. His heyday was right in the middle of his target market. I was in undergrad, and I was listening to all of this hubbub go along. And I remember several years after that, the big news story was that he had moderated his claim, and he said, well, studies do seem to show that observation does seem to decrease crime. So it could be evolutionarily advantageous that to think of somebody seeing all that you do might, in fact, have a positive correlation to being more moral. And so he said that at one point, and then he's starting to cry out against the irrationality of the transgender movement. Now he's crying out against the destruction of the distinctive markers of Western civilization. I don't know. All things being told, this has not been that long of a time, right? Like I graduated college in 2011. It's now 2024. Back in 2011, Richard Dawkins wasn't saying, "Oh, cultural Christianity is nice."
Right.
He was on the boat with Sam Harris saying religion poisons everything.
Yes. Yes.
All religion.
Right. Yes.
And so it's been he's still not a Christian, but I mean in 15, 20 years, who knows what Richard Dawkins is going to be.
That's true.
Well, I think that I mean, I had two very long conversations today. One sitting out in front of the church, and one over lunch with a new friend. And in both conversations, we, one was interesting because the guy knew me back in 2016, and because from the same outreach I did, he was in the neighborhood and he would come to lunch and things like that. And he was like, "Are you the same guy?" It's like because he had noticed like this, I guess, very noticeable change. And I was, I guess, a lot more upfront with what I thought. And I said, "Well, the world has changed."
Yeah.
Like since 2016, like so much has changed. Like we're living through a cultural revolution. Sorry to keep saying the same thing over and over again, but like in 2016, like there were battles I didn't even know existed, that now I feel like we have to say something about, a lot of which we talk about on this particular show. So, so I think there are a lot of people for whom the events of 2020, was a kind of an eye-opening year where all of a sudden they kind of reassessed things, where their lack of trust in government is booming. And we talked in the show we previously recorded about conspiracy theories and how that can be a dangerous thing to go constantly too far in that direction. But I think a lot of people are reassessing things, and they're tired of sort of being told that every aberrant view they have is a crazy conspiracy theory, which only makes them want to investigate it more.
Yeah.
And so politics plays a big role in this. But I think there are a lot of people, like not quite like Dawkins, but kind of in a similar camp where it's like, well, we tried the other thing, and it's not working out. We talked about this in our last White Pill Radio, how you have all these stats that basically say, people are unhappy and mental illness and, all this kind of stuff. And it's like something is not working. And I think there are a lot of people who are like, maybe I need to give this Christianity thing another look.
Or something. Some other religious substitute.
Well, but he really harps on Christianity. And I mean, a couple things come to mind. When you said the 2016 pivot, at least, it made me think of when we did several podcast episodes on deconstruction and the deconstruction movement. So many people, I have polled so many people, and I've listened to so many podcasts and read so many books and articles about evangelicalism. And for so many people, 2016 was a big year because it was the Trump-Hillary showdown. Trump won. People were clutching their pearls everywhere. But people started to pay more attention to politics because things had taken a turn. But I also think culture war stuff was really just on the rise.
Yeah.
And so much of what we talk about in politics now is culture war stuff. And I think that's partly what this is all in reference to.
Yeah.
I think he recognizes there's a moral standard that Christians have that works in light of all of that. And so, I mean, he can be a moral person that recognizes morality even as an atheist, but he's heavily borrowing from, and I guess he's admitting that by saying he's a quote cultural Christian, from the Christian worldview. Like that you can be moral without Christianity, but morality exists because God exists.
And these are, by the way, the claims of most presuppositional apologists that, for you to construct the world that you think is good, you have to borrow from my worldview to do it. So Richard Dawkins doesn't actually possess the right presuppositions to build the world that he wants, so he steals from my worldview to do it.
Well, let me ask, instead of a presuppositional apologetics a la Barth, let me bring in Francis Schaeffer. So when we lived in Scotland, we lived on a close in Edinburgh, and we lived across the street from the great statue of David Hume, which, by the way, there are no really good atheists like David Hume anymore. I mean, David Hume was a giant.
Like a Rephaim. Let me stop. We just recorded
podcast.
Something else. Yes.
So on the other side of our close, our little medieval alleyway, there was a church which had closed down and had been sold to a nightclub, and the Gothic arches of the windows at the front had been painted over with a picture of the sort of Led Zeppelin Milton Falling Angel. That's number 3, Milton reference.
Hey.
And that it was a nightclub and it was called Sin.
Woo! Wow.
In an abandoned church. And I want to ask Richard Dawkins, okay, the building is still there.
That's right. The cathedral.
Is that the same?
Right.
Do you want that? Or are we still missing something?
Ooh, that's really good. I like that.
Yeah.
You should be a professor. This is good stuff. Yeah.
Well, let's go to the next article. Which
it's connected because
sure.
I heard this being referenced on a podcast that I listened to, and I went and looked it up because, sometimes you listen to a podcast and you think maybe they're spinning it. This is out of Axios. It seems that the research came from, we were trying to figure it out before this, maybe Household Pulse
I think
survey.
they
There's some Pew
compiled
references.
the results of several different polls.
Either way, a survey that Axios reported on is basically talking about how often, or actually how not often, people go to church. And it's all phrased in the negative, but the gist of it is, if you're looking at this map of the United States, the darker the color, the less often people go to church.
Because they're in spiritual darkness.
And it does coincide with political lines. I mean, it just really a lot of the. I mean, it's not.
I mean, the Bible
one
Belt
for one.
still is relatively.
The Bible
light,
Belt is.
so, yeah.
I mean, if you were to put this up against a red and blue or purple map about political leanings, it would line up.
Can we flash
pretty
this somewhere on
easily.
the feed?
Yeah, we need a producer for that. So if you want to produce,
I was going to say this would be a great time to put a commercial in about giving us money.
Description of the map. Obviously, Washington, Oregon are
Pacific Northwest is very dark. Yes.
Maine and Vermont and all of those places are very dark. Alaska's very dark. And then kind of in the middle of all of the lighter areas, there's Colorado. And then Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, all the south is obviously the lightest, along with Utah for the Mormons. But what's interesting to me is this also kind of like, I don't know, does it just have to do with sunshine, right? Like Scandinavia has very low church attendance, all these long days and nights.
Well, Florida, sadly, is not as, and that's the Sunshine State. I know, I grew up there. They're not as light as some of the others, which is interesting because, and we used to joke living in Florida that Florida is really just New York because they all transplant down when they retire or just snowbirds coming in the winter or whatever. But there is enough of a transplantation. Transplantation? Is that the right word?
yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show. From, New York, New Jersey, some of those states that Florida has picked up a tinge of that, at least when it comes to this research. It's still solidly red politically, but
well, there are other polls that correspond. There was a Gallup poll that came out Wednesday before Easter because they like to do this around Easter, sort of take the pulse, and so basically it was a 12% drop in 20 years. So 42% 20 years ago went to church regularly. Now it's like 30%. So that's across America. So basically a third of America right now at this moment goes to church regularly. Maybe like once a month, once a week, something like that. So those are pretty low numbers. So the trend is definitely going in one direction.
43% of adults would deny that religion has had a positive impact on American life.
Yeah, those are interesting too, because the question, this is going to get at the Christian nationalist issue.
That's where I was going to go with it.
At some point, because I think the question is, There's what is the other one where basically they feel like there's less more than 3/4 of Americans say religion's role in public life is shrinking, and I think there was something like 57% said that was bad. Here I am making up stats on the spot.
No, it says 57% of adults say religion has a positive impact on American life.
Above that, half of adults tell Pew both that religion is losing influence and that this is a bad thing.
So I think anyway, we're not going to jump the gun on the Christian nationalism, which we're going to talk about at a future event and so on and so forth. What's that?
You said jump the gun. He's in pastor dad jokes over here.
Okay,
yeah.
so but I do think that our relationship to, speaking of Dawkins, right? This gets to like our relationship to religion and how important it is, the way it shapes our society, the way it should shape our society, and whether it's a positive or negative thing. And I think related to what Dawkins was talking about, I think there is a certain group of people in the population that are kind of looking around and they're like, I need to give Christianity another look. I'm hopeful that's the case anyway. They may not go to a church though. And this is my concern of what is happening, which is that people are getting in certain areas, people are getting more conservative. They're getting more politically active. There's a big effort to get evangelicals to vote this year because like 30 million evangelicals don't even show up to vote. Jeez. Like the most basic civic service, which would radically redefine American politics if evangelicals just voted.
Wow.
But in every local state, national election, you can imagine. So, But I think that there are people who are like becoming more conservative, if you will, but they're still not going to church. There's still not a value seen in church. In the community, they have low regard for preachers. They have low regard for the institution. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to combat that. I don't know if it can be combated.
I wonder about, so this particular poll is about going to church.
Yeah.
And so obviously I guess it's Catholic and Protestant. I mean, they break it down later, but it's not as asking them, are you spiritual? Are you Christian? Are you even religious? They're asking them about church attendance. And I think there's something interesting there because I think a much greater number of people, this will get into the book you've been hyping lately, but a much bigger number of people would probably call themselves spiritual, open to spiritual things. But there is a difference. There's a marked difference between spiritual and Christian. And there's another difference between being Christian and going to church, being part of a church community. There is something, going back to what you were saying about the institutions that make life work. Church is one of them. And it's not just because they wag their finger at you and tell you when you're doing something wrong, right? I mean, the community that's built there helps all of life work better. And so I'm not saying that people should go to church just for the community. I mean, start there maybe.
Be better than nothing.
Because I do think that we go to church to worship God and to pledge our allegiance to Christ, right? To worship him. But that is something that I think this poll is pointing to that's been lost, is like, oh, I'll be spiritual at home by myself where I'm essentially worshiping myself. Because I do what I want and God and I quote God and I have a, personal relationship and we do our own thing and he doesn't care if I go to church. Well, I actually do think he cares if you go to church. And we recorded a podcast. You should go back and listen with Joel Davis. I think it's called Go Back to Church or Why You Should Go Back to Church. And he's like wagging his finger in the thumbnail, which he probably doesn't like. He's actually a super nice guy, but it was a great episode about this very thing. Like your life will be better, not to mention you'll be obedient to the God who made you and rescued you at church by worshiping at church. And then of course, I think the world will work better. Anyway, I'm off my high horse now. Yeah. But this isn't just about spirituality. This is about church.
Yeah. So Tara Isabella Burton has a book called Strange Rites, and she goes through and analyzes what she calls these new religions for a godless world. And based on the statistics that she's compiled, she has a breakdown of what exactly she means by this, but the gist of it is any sort of new age, positive thinking, energy,
new thought,
new thought. If you like, a large percentage of Christians say that they're Christian, but also believe in reincarnation. All of this, So all of this conjuries of various eclectic religious beliefs. She says makes up about half of the population of the United States. About 50% of people believe in something in this
realm.
Yeah, realm.
So wait, does that include people like us that are Christians and don't believe in all that woo-woo?
That excludes Orthodox Christianity.
Okay.
This new form of whatever
50%.
It's called. 50% of the country. So the age of
who is your favorite witch to follow on TikTok?
Well, there are over 1 million registered witches in the United States, and that is more than the number of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Is it 144?
Or members of the Orthodox Presbyterian Church? Yeah, or Presbyterian Church in America. I heard that once. Wicca versus PCA. It's crazy.
Funny.
I'm reminded of the tagline from the commercial that they made at Dunder Mifflin in The Office, which ended with "limitless paper in a paperless world." So it's like,
wait a minute.
It's like, wait a minute. What did you say? Something about religious rights in a godless world? Anyway. But yeah, so I think that I guess I am hopeful, though. I am hopeful that there is an awakening. I think people are maybe at least starting to question certain narratives, institutional narratives, that are fundamentally godless, I believe. I've long said, I think every institution in America it's the long march through the institutions. So you look at the academy, the media, Hollywood, the government itself, they're essentially leftist to a one.
Now the medical world.
What's that?
Now the medical world.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so every one of these institutions is they have a profoundly godless approach, and it's becoming less and less. Even the veil of neutrality is being lifted, and I think more and more people are going, "Oh, I see. There is a spiritual war, which is what we pre-recorded, but it'll come out after this. There is this kind of spiritual war going on. Like worldviews really matter, foundations really matter. You have to build your the world on something, and so I think there are certain people. I'm hopeful that people are kind of going, okay, I need to re-examine my values here. And maybe they'll go back to church. And hopefully the church is worthy, of having people revisit them. So.
And let me say this. I know, anecdotally, that there are plenty of listeners to this podcast that don't go to church. And they're Christian. Maybe they're just kind of between churches and the church shopping has turned into, I'll get to it later or whatever. But I would just really encourage you to go. Go check out some churches. Even the 3 churches that are represented here, would love to have you visit. That would be First Lutheran, Christ the King Presbyterian, and Oak Forest Church. All 3 would be solid. But honestly, any of the churches that our leadership team is a part of, there are so many good churches in Houston. Go to church this Sunday.
Yep.
If you're listening to this.
Can I ask a spicy question?
So spicy. Let's hear it.
Do churches need to stop live streaming their services?
Ooh.
I mean, COVID's over.
Yeah. We still do it. So, I mean, I should offer a defense of that. Yeah.
Do you?
Does Christ the King?
Yeah.
They don't live stream it live, but they do post it
As
on,
like a podcast.
on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a good argument to be made for it. I also, have a 94-year-old lady that watches.
Aw.
So it's kind of like it has started this secondary thing of but we don't treat the online community, which is quite small anyway, but as like a campus. We don't like fundraise for it. I don't look into the camera and talk to them directly. I mean, it's
There are no red states and blue states. Oh wait, that's somebody else. Okay.
It's kind of like, well, the infrastructure's there. It's easy to do for people who can't make it. But on the other hand, when people miss church, I could be like, well, you can watch it online. Write a sermon report and get back to me.
Write a sermon report.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So
it's like book it.
Yeah,
but for sermons.
We need some pastoral visitations to happen again. We come around and say, hey, we haven't seen you for a couple weeks.
Yes. Yeah. Now that's an interesting question because I do know plenty of people that will just watch live stream and you'd for sure miss them. I mean, your sweet 94-year-old woman, I'm glad that she has that option. But there are plenty of able-bodied millennials in PJs, watching church. And I mean, during COVID, it became really easy to do that. And then you kind of stick in it. But
yeah.
Well, you guys should come to one of our churches because they're awesome.
What you got? Where's J.K. Rowling going to church these days?
J.K. Rowling.
Thank you.
Yeah, rolling like bowling.
Oops. And
every time I hear them talk about her, they say Rowling.
She's Scottish now, even though she's English. She moved. She moved to Scotland.
So living in Edinburgh, I know the Elephant House Cafe. That's where she did a lot of writing on Harry Potter. There you go. Harry Potter all over Edinburgh. But yeah, J.K. Rowling, transgenderism, hate speech, and a dark day for the Scottish Enlightenment. Wow, bringing it back to David Hume. So J.K. Rowling has been a Twitter magnate for a while now, taking her stand on behalf of women's rights and against the follies of transgenderism. And she's been defending actual biological women. And now, thanks to Hamza Yusuf and the Scottish Parliament's new law against hate speech, the controversy was, can you be arrested and jailed for speaking out what it says, stirring up hatred against protected categories, including those based on transgender identity and sexual orientation. And so J.K. Rowling did a whole stream of tweets calling out various high-profile transgender people in the media and pointing out very correctly that they are actually men. And her hashtag challenge was, arrest me.
Yep.
That is so freaking bold.
Yeah, she's awesome. I mean, I got to give her a lot of credit. Yeah. And they did not. They formally had to come out and say, we find no cause.
Yeah, the BBC says, I find no fault in this man.
And the irony was that when this hate speech law passed or whatever, so many people spoke against the
so
guy, saying you're the one speaking against white.
The number one complaint filed within the first 24 hours of this law taking into effect was the First Minister of Scotland, Hamza Yusuf.
So trolling when trolling is perfected as an art form like that, I'm just the irony.
But was it was like 4,000 or something, right?
Yeah, it's yes,
overwhelming.
Yeah, 4,000 criminal referrals, basically saying to the police, arrest this man. He has spoken hate against people because of their race, because they're white.
And just for those that are listening that don't know what we're talking about, what's his name again?
Hamza Yusuf.
Hamza Yusuf. When he was giving a speech around this law, he just started listing all the people in government that are white, and he starts listing them by their role. White, so-and-so, white, all the people in the such and such, white. And he's just going on. He's listing, white. And he is not white. And so he was saying, other than me, there's no one else, people of color here. Which, I mean, it is Scotland.
What I hope our audience, which, we maybe have some kind of new Christians or maybe people who've thought about these issues for a long time, but what I have said to our congregation when we've talked about presuppositional apologetics or worldview issues, I say, listen for value-laden words, okay? Value-laden words, good, bad, right, wrong, hate, love, whatever. All of those things have a worldview attached. They're not neutral. There is no neutrality. So any value-laden word, just simply get in the habit of saying, well, what do you mean by that? So when someone says a hate crime or hate speech, hate by what standard? Who gets to define hate? One person's hate is another person's meaningful critique. But what the danger of this should be pretty obvious, that this law, which is very far-flung and actually quite vague all at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like, what's scary is who gets to make the final decision that you have hate in your heart. It's the same reason that you should oppose hate crime. Certain crime all crime is hate crime, as one would say.
Right, but that's the evidence of the hate, is the crime.
Yeah. So I think there's this, in a similar way, kind of came up when Governor Abbott kind of offered this kind of special category of anti-Semitic speeches.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, and it received criticism on the right for basically saying, wait a minute, this is, we don't think that there are special categories of sin or crime, and so we don't think there's special levels of protection either, and so, one man's, if you critique Israel's particular military, present military campaign, and there's this brouhaha that came out today about the food thing and, the food providers in Gaza who were killed, and Israel knew.
Really sad.
So, so you now have sort of Biden going to Netanyahu and saying, stop this. Does that mean he's anti-Semitic? If a person says something to a Jew, okay, that says, I don't like your nation's military policy, is that anti-Semitic? But that's what some people accused, for example, Candace Owens of doing. I'm not defending her. I'm just saying, these are very complicated issues. And when you just throw out, this is hate.
Yeah, don't be a meanie.
I'm so thankful for someone like J.K. Rowling, who has the money and the stature, Rowling, to basically dare. Yeah. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take a reciprocity and a willingness to say, come get me.
Well, she also said if any person faces prosecution for something that they said about defending the rights of biological women, that she will also say the exact same thing, and you can arrest the both of it at the same time. Yeah.
Wow.
And if you don't, then you have a case of course, in a Christian worldview, you have a case of selective prosecution, which is exactly what Donald Trump is saying about, well, wait a minute, Biden handled classified documents this way, and I handled them this way. It's selective prosecution, and that's probably why that case in Florida is going to get thrown out.
The Ashley Biden diary was recently declared to be legitimate because the Department of Justice is seeking prosecution over it.
That's
a different story,
but very interesting. Yes, for how many years they said the Jill Biden, or not Jill, his daughter's diary was not legit. It was not real. It was fabricated. And now they're arresting the person who actually got it to a media source, for like confiscating private whatever. Where she said that she, as a matter of fact, in this diary, took showers with her father,
Oh, gosh.
So that's...
Wow.
You hadn't heard that?
No, I had not heard that yet. Was
there's some interesting things in that diary. But, I mean, just not making any judgments about it. I'm just saying.
It sounded judgment laden to me, value laden.
Anyway,
even.
Hate speech makes me nervous because again,
it's the same thing.
Because you're the cranky get off my lawn guy.
Healthcare equity or any of these other things. it's such a fuzzy category, and it does create a secular code of values.
Yes.
Right, which is defined by whoever happens to be speaking the loudest
In charge.
at that time.
Well, speaking of speaking, the next story from Christianity Today is sort of following up on. There were a number of protesters at an abortion clinic who violated the FACE Act. I can't remember off. It's something. If it's a federal freedom
of access to clinic entrances.
Thank you. So basically, it's a specific law that allows people to go into, I guess maybe medical clinics, but basically abortion clinics, because there was a strategy in the mid 80s for people to sort of lock arm in arm and to make it impossible for someone to. What was the name of that movement?
Well, Right to Life did some of them.
Okay.
I mean, I remember being a kid, and our family was actually involved in some of that kind of stuff. I think we probably would look back and say we may have done things differently.
Well,
but
there's been a whole debate about strategies of preventing abortions, but one of them was that, like sit-ins, like civil rights sit-ins, it was a similar strategy of like, we are going to prevent, people from accessing this abortion clinic to kill their own child. And so I still don't know how effective of a strategy it is, but my point is only to point out, and let me just read so people know what we're talking about, some of this article. A growing number of federal prosecutions and convictions of pro-life activists is prompting a new legal debate that their attorneys hope will go to the Supreme Court. This week, 6 pro-life activists were convicted of federal crimes in Nashville for demonstrating outside a clinic in early 2021. And so basically you had a dozen protesters who've been convicted of federal crimes in the last year for basically blocking entrances according to the FACE Act. And so you've got, basically grandmas getting, multiple years in prison for, having never committed a crime in their life. They committed they were actually saving the life of a child, we would say. They were not harming anyone.
And were they actually blocking it? Because if memory serves, they weren't. It wasn't linking arm in arm, and it was impossible to get in, but it was...
The images I've seen, they were
singing hymns
sitting.
And praying in a medical pavilion hallway outside the clinic.
Right.
A police officer testified at the trial that the protesters were peaceful, but they refused to leave. They were convicted of obstructing access to reproductive health services.
But obstructing access, in my mind, was that they made people feel uncomfortable if they were coming to kill their child.
Well, and speaking of England, it wasn't that long ago that the
know.
woman silently praying outside an abortion
crazy.
clinic was, and I think maybe in the UK they have like now you have to be 100 feet away.
Yeah, there are zones.
Yeah. So I only want to point out there is just an incredible darkness around this issue. Apparently, Donald Trump is making some kind of major statement on abortion today or tomorrow.
Good. It'd be nice for him to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he's going to try to find some kind of compromise. And the way that I'm hearing the pro-life community talk about this just makes my stomach sick. But I think it's because there is a huge concern that there is essentially the single female vote and even the married female vote to a degree who are going to come out in droves in November. Basically because there is going to be fear mongering about, the Republican Party will not let you, get an abortion. They will tell you what to do with your body. I mean, it's been said for decades. It's nothing new, but it's like, especially in light of Dobbs now, the Supreme Court sort of on their side, and you have states, with all these restrictions. So, anyway, that's a bigger topic, and one day we need to devote time to like what is the response, because there are a lot of people in the pro-life community saying, look, just do the 20-week thing.
Right.
And I'm going, have you ever seen a 20-week fetus? I mean, how can a pro-life person be saying this? It blows my mind.
Well, the troubling thing about this when I was reading through it is the reason why they get these 10, 11-year sentences is there is a civil rights conspiracy charge that is added on after that. And that some of it is also included under the RICO rubric.
Umbrella, yeah.
Yeah, which everyone is now familiar with because of Donald Trump again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's New York in the 80s all over.
Right, yeah.
And so you actually don't even have to be present at the abortion clinic to face potential prosecution under RICO if you are, quote-unquote, conspiring.
Right.
So if you were the admin who was like telling people what time to be there and emailing them.
If you're part of the Facebook page that...
Yeah, well, if it gets even worse than that, because the Douglas Mackey case, right? Douglas Mackey, the meme guy who said in 2016 to vote for Hillary, text this number, right? Well,
Sorry.
I mean, he's been, convicted, I think, of
I know.
10 years in prison. He's on appeal. It may have been reduced and he's still appealing it. I'm not, but he's speaking out about it right now. But they upped the charge. It's called stacking charges. It's a prosecution tactic. So basically, but he was in like a Telegram channel or something, and he'd say, yeah, he gets 600 messages a day, and it's not like I read them, but because he was in that group and could have read a message where people said nasty things about Hillary Clinton or what have you, and he posted a meme, they put two and two together and said, you're part of a conspiracy.
Grief.
And so the point is selective prosecution is, but it's necessary. Okay. We don't prosecute every crime. Cops will give you a warning, if you're speeding, I got it, but what seems to be happening is that the full weight of the government is going against people who are not violent, people who are have political opinions. That's why we have the First Amendment, to protect political speech, to protect controversial speech, to protect, dare I say, hate speech. That's why it exists. And so there is a conscious decision by our Department of Justice, it seems, to go after certain offenders and look the other way on other offenders. So doing everything they can to protect the abortionist, but going after people who are trying to save the life of the child. Doing everything they can to literally bail out people who destroyed cities and burn them down and rioted, but going after people who link arm in arm at an abortion clinic.
So in California, correct me if I'm wrong, squatters' rights. This is now the news story in New York and these other places. So New York, it's something, like 20 days?
30 days.
30 days. In California, it's 5 days.
Good grief.
You could have left for spring. And so I saw somebody...
Say more about that for people that don't know what you're referring to.
So I saw somebody tell this story online that and if you leave for spring break and somebody breaks into your house and lives in your house for the 5 days or 7 days that you're gone for spring break, you cannot remove them from your house by force in the state of California. You can try to go to a judge and get the judge to write an eviction notice, and then maybe
better not do that, though, because if you say that you're evicting them, that means they're a tenant.
Yes.
Oh, that's
in which
right.
case, sometimes you have people actually paying off to the tune of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, the people that have broken into and are living in your house.
It's insane.
Yeah, there was a guy on like Top Chef or one of the celebrity cooking shows who did this very successfully. And LeBron James is complaining, like 2 doors down from him in his $40 million mansion, there's a squatter who throws parties every night. And there was a story I shared in our group meet that we didn't talk about, but a woman who came from Spain months after her mother died in New York to close out on the estate or whatever. And there were squatters in her apartment, and her son finds her in a duffel bag.
Her body.
Her body.
Her
and of course, they're on the loose. So, it where we're at, the kind of meta picture is that I think there's a general sense that people feel like things are sort of out of control. Like there are criminals who are protected, and there are innocent people who are prosecuted. And that's a really bad combination. Now, maybe I have bias, of what I'm seeing in the media or what's in my Twitter feed or what the media decides to pick up on. Maybe these are all far out cases that, just affect a few people here and there, and I shouldn't have to worry about it at all. Maybe.
Well, first of all, everyone has bias.
Yeah.
But what's the white pill in all of this? It sounds really scary. You can't
leave your house for spring break? Yes.
And even when you do leave your house, you can't be on a Facebook group that had anything to do with an anti-abortion.
Well, here's my white pill. There's a distinction between the visible church and the invisible church in theology, and the visible church is all of the people who claim to be Christian. The invisible church is all of the people who really are, right? Because for Christianity, unlike basically any other world religion, just saying that you are a member doesn't necessarily make it so. It's a metaphysical change that happens in you. And so in various countries where Christianity is not tolerated, places like Iran and China and North Korea, and reminder, Christianity is still the most persecuted religion in the world today. The gap between the people who claim Christ and the people who are simply there in order to get membership at their country club is very small, right? Because you have no social benefit for doing so. Here in the United States, that gap between people who claim the name of Christ and people who have not has been very large, because it has been of social benefit to say that. We have been built on the cultural capital of Christian civilization, as we started talking about Richard Dawkins. That has brought some positive things. It has brought some negative things. For instance, all of the immoral behavior, all of the hypocritical behavior that cultural Christians will indulge in to bring shame upon the name of Christ. Can we say that one good thing in having the culture turn against Christianity is that we will have fewer cultural Christians, and the people that really bear the name of Christ are going to be more visibly matching the commands that Christ gives them in order to be obedient in loving one another and in loving the world, and that Christianity will become actually more visible the smaller it is?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's good news that this is being exposed. I mean, what I was saying earlier about how abortion will be used this election season, because I don't think the left tends to have a lot of issues to run on right now. I mean, people are unsure about the economy, and immigration's not popular. So and by far the voting demographic that tends to vote for left,
white females,
single white women. So and so what are the issues? So the IVF issue in Alabama, and the abortion issue, and to me, I keep thinking that is so dark. It is so dark to make the inhumanity of not only a conceived embryo, that's in a freezer somewhere, an issue, but, a woman who wants to take the life of I mean, you're banking all of your political aspirations on the right to kill children. Mm-hmm. That is how dark it is. And I don't know any other way to see it than that. Mm-mm. I am hopeful that people will finally wake up and say, wait a minute, like, this is what this really is coming down to. This is the great payoff at the end. I have the right to kill a kid.
Right.
That's it. That's the utopia.
And to prosecute people who tell you shouldn't.
Yeah, but it's okay, because like I can do all the drugs I want, and I can watch all the porn I want, and I can
not in Texas, baby.
Not on Pornhub anyway. We talked about that.
We did.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that at some point the eyes will, the scales will fall off, and people will be, oh wait, this is what we stand for. Get behind the rhetoric, and so there is a kind of fissure happening, and I think that's a good thing.
You know what this reminds me of? C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. In the third book of C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, in That Hideous Strength, you've got this guy who's a hyper-progressive, and he wants to be part of the elite. He wants to be part of the cabal. And so they take him to the reconditioning room.
Oh, boy.
And they attempt to strip away all of his organic biological presuppositions about aesthetics and morality. And so everything in the room is just a little bit wrong. Anyway, you just go read the passage for yourself, read the whole book. But what happens is they're attempting to strip away the last bits of his moral impulses towards rightness and goodness. And what happens is he has a paradoxical reaction. The idea that he enters this room, and far from being overwhelmed by it, it shows him that there is, in fact, such a thing as rightness and goodness and beauty and truth. And that, in fact, he does want that. And so it exposes the existence of these things that he had never otherwise acknowledged by the very fact of stripping away that final, most fundamental aspect of it.
Interesting. Sounds a little like the silver chair.
Well,
that Lewis guy.
Same guy.
Yeah.
One or two more articles, kind of in the same vein. I stumbled across this, just today. This is from the Daily Mail. And just as a kind of bit of why I think this is important is because it seems like these two things shouldn't have anything to do with one another, but what we kind of call wokeness it's not just like this fringe thing we can just kind of laugh at and poke fun at. Like, it's entrenched into institutions where it seems like it doesn't belong. So, headline, UCLA Med School forced first-year students to attend, quote, structural racism course where screaming pro-Hamas speaker told them to kneel for bizarre woke prayer while pediatrician DEI boss looked on. I think Daily Mail's a tabloid, but it's not like a conservative rag, right?
It's not like I don't know if I'd call it a tabloid. It's not elite journalism.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know, is New York Post a tabloid?
I was literally going to say, is it like New York Post?
It's like New York Post. It might even be owned by the Murdochs. Anyway, a couple of articles. Actually, I do want to read a fair amount of this article because some of the details are like crazy and shocking to me. First year UCLA. Here's the point. This is a medical school. Okay, if this were like a Buddhist like yoga retreat or something like that, or some like I don't know, like Greenpeace retreat out in the wilderness, like it would make sense to me. This is a medical school where you're supposed to learn about like diagnosing diseases and treating them, right? Isn't that what you learn at medical school? Anyway, First year, UCLA medical students were forced to sit through a bizarre lecture by a pro-Hamas activist who made them pray to, quote, Mama Earth, while a faculty member sought to identify one student who refused to participate. Lisa Gray Garcia gave the 2-hour presentation at Geffen Hall in the university's downtown campus March 27th. The lecture was a mandatory part of the Structural Racism and Health Equity class, that was all caps, Structural Racism and Health Equity class, that all future doctors must take, administered by pediatrician Lindsay Wells. Gray Garcia calls herself a poverty scholar. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
I
I like we both looked to you. What
Maybe
is
it's
Scola?
like a scholar or
So
something?
Scala may be, because she uses a lot of puns. The first time I read it, I thought Scola is like an old term for like a poet or a bard or somebody that knows lore.
Okay.
But
Like a guru or something.
So that's the word scop. So I think I don't know.
Yeah. Well, she keeps her face covered with a kafaya.
Kafia, yeah,
Thank
the
you.
Palestinian scarf wrap.
Okay. Except in a few interviews, and she called Hamas October 7th attack justified. So she's like, while the rest of us are kind of like, wow, like maybe there's like a dispute about like Israel's response or like when is enough?
Palestinians, yeah.
Yeah. So like she's just outright saying like Hamas
was
October
fine.
7th, that horrible thing, that was justified. Okay. Students were instructed to touch the floor with their fists while she made a quote non-secular end quote prayer to quote Mama Earth and our ancestors. That nothing
I'm
taken
sorry.
about that.
I'm like laughing because it sounds like a fake. This sounds like something you just typed up, you and AI.
I know. It's like
It's not funny.
It's like
No, it gets worse. Keep going.
Yeah, she claimed private property was a capitalist lie that killed black, brown, and houseless people who were forced to live on the streets. She grew up homeless with her single mother from the age of 11. Sounds like she probably endured quite a bit of trauma. Railed against anti-homeless campaigns during another part of the lecture she posted online. Not only are our bodies considered unclean in public, not only are our lives criminalized for being outside without access to a roof, but
Politricksters.
Thank you. Politricksters use us for their campaigns. Actually, that's true. Actually, there's a lot of exploitation of the homeless for political ends. It's a gigantic money laundering operation. That's why they want more homeless people, not less. That's my commentary. What else? Where was the really crazy stuff?
At one point, she led students in chanting Free, Free Palestine as UCLA faculty, including Dr. Wells, watched in silence. During a second call for students to kneel on the floor, one refused to do so. An unidentified UCLA faculty member is said to have inquired as to the student's name. And then, so
this is like the old picture, which I guess is legit, of like everyone doing the Nazi salute, and the one guy like just standing there.
Well, yeah. So this is part of the lecture that's the part of the article that's not printed here. This was a complaint that was filed by one of the Jewish student associations on campus.
Gotcha.
That they were forced to take part in a prayer that went against their religious beliefs in favor of people that want them dead, and were feared to face consequences from the school if they did not comply.
Well, it's interesting. She says non-secular prayer. That's a quote. And so there's so many things to talk about with this one article. But one is that if you are still of the opinion that generally speaking that these woke movements sort of can be neutral in some way, and it's just about redistribution of filthy lucre. It's just let's just reallocate money, and then once we're equal, we'll be done. Like, you're barking up the wrong tree. Like this is
a wonderful chapter in Tara Isabella Burton's book, Strange Rights.
so this is religious. I mean, she views it as a religious crusade. And the UCLA does too. And so when they could
State
be learning
school,
about
right?
What's that?
Is UCLA a state school?
Yeah, I would think so.
University.
I mean, yeah.
LA.
It's a public school.
And these students are being forced to take part in religious activities?
Yeah. So I'm just sort of at a loss as to why this is needed. Now, they're going to justify it by saying, well, yeah, this is medical equity, right? Because to have a fair society, we need to have equal treatment for every patient.
She called modern medicine white science.
Oh,
I read
yeah, that
later.
was one of the ones I
And don't
wanted.
forget,
Yeah.
she called Israel Klan in reference to the KKK.
Yeah.
Good grief. This is so bizarre. Sorry.
Well, she sounds unhinged. But,
Yes.
what goes for unhinged anymore is kind of out there. But I don't know what to say. When I'm talking about this fissure, when I'm talking about people's eyes opening, when I'm talking about people questioning institutions, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like there are normal people like me who are going, is my doctor going to be one of these people
Yeah, really.
who went to one of these schools who like believes this stuff? I mean, because if so, I'm not comfortable going as a white person.
Just tell them you identify as something else. Tell them you identify as Palestinian.
Well,
So this is the same thing in the transgender movement. If you read Lost in Transnation, which is another book that I recommend, I don't believe it's written by a Christian. I think she's just a
Miriam Grossman.
Miriam Grossman. I don't think she's a Christian as far as I know. I might be wrong. The medical community, like these things that are supposed to be handing down the strictures and the standards about how to treat transgender people and whatnot, they aren't really consulted, right? There's a few people that are just given free rein to write these documents, and then nobody else gets a say in it. And actually, they're kind of afraid to speak up because they can face having their license removed or being drawn up on disciplinary action from their professional communities. So you've got exactly what's happening here. You've got everybody going along with it because they're too afraid to say anything, when in fact it's a few radicals that are leading the charge, and everybody else, they all know it's crazy. They all know it's ridiculous, but they have, or they perceive to have, no power.
Yeah. Well, as an example, you can't diagnose something properly if they're, this is a South Park episode, right? Where the teacher, what's his name, goes in and he says, I want a, hysterectomy.
Yeah.
And it's a man who's transgender, right? So it's like, you can't diagnose someone if you don't have the right medical history, or, basic facts about biology, or, understanding hormones. This, but it's like, what does Palestine have to do with any of this? It's like, what, I don't know.
There is a strong case to be made for a real medical equity conversation, right? There are ways in which various communities in the United States and the rest of the world do not have equal access to treatment. But, and so like when she's talking about the homelessness problem, that's good. I can see that as being appropriate. That's good to have somebody talk about how we can give these people access to healthcare in whatever way it makes sense. But yeah, like your pediatric pharmacist does not need to have an opinion on Israel and Palestine as part of their professional role.
Yeah.
Right. They can have that as part of their personal beliefs, but that's not part of their training that they're paying tuition for at the pharmacy school or at the oncology school. And here at one of the flagship state institutions in the state of California, where you can't even have a Christian speaker invited on campus to just speak to a voluntary Christian student organization.
Yeah.
This is required, mandated for every person that goes through this medical school to take part in. And so it's religion for me, but not for thee. And it's absurd that we ought, because this, we were talking about this earlier, the impulse that you make everything an ethical issue, right? I have to have an opinion on this because silence is violence. In some sense, that's valid, right? Everything is an ethical issue. You can't separate religion from politics. You can't separate morality from legislation. The question is, whose
by
standard?
what standard?
Yeah.
That was the last sip of beer.
Yeah.
So when you started talking about like there is a conversation to be had about medical equity, I started thinking all the time that's being wasted on this could be used talking about disaffected populations. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that I think even in the beginning of COVID, we realized that COVID affects different populations differently. And then there are all kinds of populations where you realize if you aren't knowledgeable about, say, sickle cell or whatever, then you're not going to be a good doctor to those people. That could be the class that you're taking. That could be the lesson that you're taking, that you're in. But instead, you're putting your fists on the ground and praying to Mother Earth to, I don't know, bless Hamas or something.
There's a lot of evidence that says that most of medical practice is biased towards seeing man as the default.
Yeah.
Right? So that the particularly female medicine and understanding female healthcare and health needs, even just basic female biology, lags behind the understanding of male biology and male-centric medicine? Why aren't we talking about that? Like that was getting pointed out in the 1800s.
Yeah. But like this is the problem with equity as opposed to equality is
Yes.
that to have this perfectly level result, not opportunity, but result, which is what equity really means, doesn't that mean that white people now need to get worse healthcare, or males need to get worse healthcare to even it out?
Well, some people would say so.
Yeah. So I think that's a problem. That's not who I want my that's not how I want my doctor to think about these things. But I would say this too. A part of this rethinking of things, and like I mentioned 2020 earlier, well, that's because of COVID and its origins, and for some people, the cookies that they told us to take to help with that. I'm not saying the word.
Goodness.
Well,
wow.
I don't know. I don't know what YouTube's policies are anymore. I think you can say the V word. But
I
I'm
wish
not sure.
they were cookies. That sounds delicious. I'm very hungry. Continue.
So, but in rethinking some things, one of the things I came to realize is that the medical profession at large, it's not actually very concerned about your health.
No.
The whole system doesn't care about your health, which is why we have a corn-based food system and a pharmaceutical-based, cure of everything.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily, some like off in the woods, hippie or whatever. I'm just saying, but like there are, but we never talked during COVID about like healthy living. Like the best way to help with COVID is like lose weight, get in shape.
My plumber tried to sell me a subscription plan the other day.
Too?
Yeah.
Plumbing?
Yeah. So actually I've got two different plumbers tried to offer me a monthly subscription-based service for them to do preventative maintenance or whatever. Like this is the new model.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
cheaper to not clog your drain.
Sure. So pay us your monthly fee along with all your other streaming services and whatnot. It's the same thing with medicine.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I worked for a few years as a cold caller for a used machinery manufacturing sales company. And the lathes, the Bridgeport lathes they built back in the 1940s would still run and could still command a price. The CNC computer controlled machines from 2012, nobody wants. Useless.
Wow. Crazy.
Because at some point the car manufacturers, the machinery manufacturers, everybody realized we make a lot more money selling aftermarket parts than we do the one refrigerator that your grandma bought after the war, which is still running.
My grandfather, we just got rid of a refrigerator from 1949. He died when he was 103, and it was still in the basement. It was rusty on the outside, but it still worked. It was incredible. It's planned obsolescence.
People used to talk about American manufacturing and how it was the golden. That's why. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
That used to be American medicine.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, I just think we need to rethink, and we talked about this with Meredith when we did a whole episode about food. We don't actually talk about health, and we there's a pharmaceutical motivation, financial motivation to basically make a poison or a medicine. We'll give it a good name. The solution to everything. Related to this, real fast, then we're out of time. I know this was an article from Boston.com. Libs of TikTok highlighted it. I follow her on Twitter, so I found it. These Massachusetts hospitals won't automatically file neglect reports for babies born with drugs in their systems. Mass General Brigham said babies born with, quote, substance exposure alone will no longer be reported to state welfare agencies unless there are other concerns the baby is abused or neglected. Now, you might be saying, why would they do that? Why would a baby be born exposed to drugs, which is dangerous? It could be like considered child abuse. Why would they not report it? Well, they announced on Tuesday that it's revamping its policies regarding pregnant people.
Women.
Of any sort.
With substance abuse disorders, a condition which the hospital said disproportionately affects black people and does not alone signal child abuse or neglect. So basically, because I guess more black people, according to their own stats, are disproportionately involved. They are found to be pregnant black people, women, with some drugs in their system while they are pregnant, they're going to stop recording altogether. To agencies like, I guess,
unless
CPS.
there are other factors.
Yes.
What those factors are, I would like to know.
Yeah.
Well, especially because it's a baby. So, I mean, like some sort of malformation. I mean, they're not going to report on something about the mom.
Yeah. Well, people can be treated with methadone for opioid use disorder, which can be prescribed during pregnancy.
But fetal alcohol syndrome can't be treated.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just an example where it's like, this is how, when we complain about sort of wokeness, we say it's an alternate worldview, it's an alternate this, it's like, it's creeping into the institutions. It's not even creeping. It's like leaping into the institutions, like right where it matters, where like we can't even protect children anymore because there's this protected class, of sinners, I would say, people doing wrong things. And I think that's not good. We should have equal justice under the law. Isn't that the American idea?
Equal justice for all sinners, including you and me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Just the men. I'm fine.
Anyway.
Let me say this.
Yes.
Just as you were talking, I was thinking, the white pill angle. And when we say white pill, it's not always like, here's the optimistic viewpoint, right? Or here's the silver lining. Sometimes it's what ought we do in response.
Sure.
And I was sitting here thinking, when we were talking about the abortion thing, there was a time in my life many years ago where I started to I never went fully to sort of the other side, but I started to be more sympathetic to the abortion cause, sort of the leftist side of things on that. Again, never going all the way, but just, I don't know, like dipping my toes in the water of, well, I don't know. And it's, and I did that partly because I was not embedded in Christian community the same way that I am now or had been before. And I kind of want to go back to the go to church thing, because I really do think when you purposely put yourself in a space where you're reading scripture, so God's words, right? And you're surrounded by people that are trying their best to be obedient to Christ. So, God's law or his rule or his reign, it's more likely that you're going to be obedient and surrendered. And I mean, that's why we have church. That's why the early church started. And so there is something that happens when you make the sacrifice of getting up early on Sunday mornings and trust. No one dislikes getting up early more than I do. But, and going and worshiping your creator, your rescuer, your king, that kind of realigns some of these things. It is the preventative subscription to, I tried to resist making jokes about if you guys could see his hair, this is why his plumber would say you need a subscription service, because Austin has a lot of hair, and that's the biggest problem with plumbing, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that preventative measure is being part of a community that realigns you and says, actually, no, that's not what Christ wants for you. He wants even better.
Here's my white pill.
Yeah.
It seems like we've had a theme running through most of this stuff today, right? You might be punished for failing to comply with the woke prayer. You
might be punished for saying hateful speech in Scotland.
You might be punished for hateful speech in Scotland. You might be punished for protesting peacefully outside of an abortion clinic. I think my white pill is, let's do it.
Yeah,
let's be persecuted.
Right? #, arrest me.
Yeah.
I will not comply.
J.K. Rowling.
Right. I will not bow to the golden statue that Nebuchadnezzar has put up. And we've got so many brothers and sisters in the faith that have gone before us that have modeled this for us in the early church and throughout the world right now. This is happening right now. We have people that, as we speak, cannot meet and assemble at those churches. And if they are willing to sacrifice everything for the gospel, so we ought to be.
Yeah.
Amen.
Where can people find you, Austin?
Well, I am on Twitter, Dr. Austin Freeman. And I am also on campus at Houston Christian University. We have undergraduate programs. We have Master in Christian Apologetics, as we do have many other things. And we also have a brand new Doctor of Ministry program. So if you guys are interested in any of those things, it's hc.edu.
You can get a demon at... Sorry. Bad joke.
You can get rid of a demon, though.
You can get a demon. Sarah, where can people find you?
By the way, if you liked Austin, you can also find him at our event on May 14th, where we're going to be talking about aliens and demons. You should come before then, but that's the one where he'll be guest speaking. People can find me anywhere. Social media, the leadership page of theologybythepint.org. Or half the time I'm here at First Lutheran. Even though it's not my church, I'm here recording this and doing things. So,
it's a beautiful church.
Cool.
It is. You can find Evan. I thought you were choking.
I'm getting over a cold, I think. Anyway, yes, FL Houston First Lutheran, flhouston.org. So find us there. Anyway, but I'm Evan, so thanks for listening. Thanks you guys for coming. Until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.